Well,
That's funny.
welcome everyone. We're joking whether or not Becky can talk tonight because it's been a Monday, but let's get Instagram rolling here. Welcome,
Yeah.
friends. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. I've got rain off and on. It's been raining pretty much every night since Saturday night, and or every day and night since Saturday night, and humid, but that's all right. We need the rain. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm good. Happy Monday. Welcome to our Instagram, our Facebook folks. Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, and eventually these will get loaded onto iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So we are so glad you are here. We kind of have an interesting topic to talk about tonight.
We do. It's the fact of something that we've both kind of been discussing and talking about throughout our Instagram and our social media and our blog posts. The recalibrating or repeat crossroads of real change, right? Where do you end up and see real change? Where does that come from? What does that look like, right? How do you create your path, if you will?
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to get out of our own ways, but yeah, so that's tonight's topic. Recalibrate or repeat, reset, refocus. What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely when you have been doing something for so long, um, there is an illusion of consistency because it feels safe. And when those results aren't happening, what do you do? Because you've hit that fork in the road, right? I mean, do you keep going, repeating and doing the same thing, even though it's not effective? Or do you take the other, road and try something different? And we see this a lot with our clients, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say real quick for those that are jumping in here on YouTube and Instagram, let us know that you're here. Say hello. Welcome. Like I said, just let us know that you're watching, and we'd love to see your comments. But yeah, that is something that we see a lot of, and a lot of times people look at it as a failure.
Hmm.
A lot of times people look at it with discouragement, like, the path that they're on isn't working and they're failing at it, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes if nothing changes, nothing's going to change. And so there's going to be these moments in everyone's health journey and everyone's process, how whatever life looks like, right? Whether it's health, mindset, life transformation, whatever, where you have life happen. You can't necessarily have everything down. I've talked to a lot of clients in the aspect of, how do you manage your stress? Well, I don't have a lot of stress right now. Okay, but you're also on, in the middle of summer. That a
Right.
lot with my teachers, a lot with, once kids go back to school, once this happens, it's like, okay, but once you end up and you go back to school, or once your kids go back to school and you start this whole, kids and school and activities and all that, what is that going to end up and look like, right? You have
Right.
to be able to manage all of this, and it's life. It's going to end up and throw you that fork occasionally where you have to pivot. We have it as coaches, and I know
Hmm.
we've got Coach Sly in the chat over here, so she can end up and chime in the chat as well. But there's going to be life that throws you stress. It
Right.
doesn't mean you just throw your arms up and say the hell with it and forget everything, right? And that's before we hit live. That was one of the things that I told you was, there are challenges out there that if you mess up one day or you don't do, a single part of it, you start over at day one. That doesn't create, I mean, it creates you, working towards a goal, but it
Hmm.
also sets you up, in my opinion, for a failure. And that's not what life's about. It's true, you're going to have road bumps, you're going to have detours, but how can you continue on this path? Do you stay on a familiar path, or do you, even if that means going through some of the same patterns, some of the same habits, getting similar results, we change as we get older. So, those need to end up in change, right? Or do you end up in pause, assess where you're at, refocus where you're at, and continue towards something that you're actually serves that next level, that next stage that you're in. If you're a 40-year-old person or a 50 or a 60-year-old person, don't expect the same results that you got when you were 20, and that's
Right.
what I see a lot of times in clients that come to me for one-on-one is, well, I did this before and it worked. Or if I just do this more because I did it, when I was in my 30s or my 40s and it worked, okay, but you're not that same person, right? And so that's where you have to be willing to reassess and get away from the dogma aspect
Mhm.
and really look at things. Most people don't fail because of lack of effort. They just stay stuck in what they're doing.
Sure. Well, and letting go is scary, right? And replacing something where you're not sure, it throws you off kilter. Um, that's definitely, well, an example. Like if you do a very rigid food tracking daily, every morsel in your, goes in that food tracker, and then you turn it to maybe a reflective meal journaling, like, am I full? Am I still hungry? How am I feeling? Am I stressed? Am I stress eating? You know, that's a big shift, and that's scary sometimes.
Hmm. And
But
that's, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, if that strategy that worked before now, and you've been going at it for a while and it's not working, is it still doing the job? Or is it time for you to look at it and go, it's time for me to evolve and change it up?
And that's where I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? It's when we're in this comfort zone,
Hmm.
we don't want to push beyond our comfort zone, right?
Right.
Even if that old method no longer serves us, it's our comfort. It's
Yep.
predictable. We know what to expect. Our brains end up and love that predictability and that
Yep.
structure that we've created. But it can also mean that we're tired, we're
Hmm.
overwhelmed, and we're scared of change. Sometimes that can be scary to step outside of that.
Right.
And, yes, there are times, again, this is why we default to what used to work, right? If you've ever been that person that, has continued on with what's used to work, right? Let us know in the chat,
Hmm.
raise your hand, comment, that that's you. But we see past successes, and I'm notorious for this too, because as much as what I tracked before,
Oh, yeah.
right, I would always end up and go back, and I have bags. I literally have like a bag that's downstairs, and I have a backpack up here that has binders of information in it because I
Hmm.
was meticulous about, tracking and logging and journaling and all of that. And
Hmm.
it does also create that emotional side of it
Yep.
where past successes, right, when I was in my 30s and what I was doing, and yes, I know a lot more now than I did then, but it's
Right.
also that emotional attachment to it because when something once helped us, whether it was to lose weight or feel better or whatever the results were, right? It's it's hard to move on, and it's hard to cut ties because we cling to those tools because we associate in our mind that was success,
Right.
right? That we haven't necessarily outgrown that, or we haven't learned new information that is gonna work, right? Or is working. We tend to end up and be creatures of habit, and we tend to end up and be people that are clinging to those fast results, right?
Right.
I can tell you I got results, losing weight or whatever before, but it didn't serve its purpose, right? It led to
Right.
thyroid issues, it led to a lot of other issues over
Yep.
time. And so that's why sometimes the slower, pace, right?
Hmm.
Um and again, a lot of people cling to it because there's so many of those, challenges that start over, that they have this fear of starting over, a
Yep.
fear of shifting gears of, hey, this might work, right? But if it doesn't, then it's failure. And, or they hang on to it because their way that, was supposed to be the way, it's admitting in some way, shape, or form that it was wrong, right? And that they
Yep.
had to step outside of that. And
Right.
that's hard, right? I
Yes.
I sat in that world, trust me, for 2.5 years because I thought that way was the only way,
Right.
right? Um, I had some pretty loud voices that I was associated with in that space that I thought was the only way.
Mhm.
And when I started to, add other foods in and look beyond, it was quite the evolution that things could end up and change, right? That things didn't have to be that strict.
Right.
Um, I just needed to be a little bit more consistent with some of the other things that I was doing, right? I
Yeah.
didn't need that stricter side of myself. I didn't
Yeah.
need to do things harder or, anything along those lines. It was just I was catching myself in this repeat loop, and I was constantly, trying to go back and judge my progress off of old metrics.
Sure. Well, and I think for me, it got down to uh, good versus bad food, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had convinced myself that even one carb was bad. And I went very, very militant. And
Mm-hmm.
that was in a lot of ways was food control, and we should have had Coach Sly on here for the mental health side of this, but it often masks emotional patterns that need reflection and not suppression. Um, because I was so extreme in my restrictions, it actually was a disservice to my body. And I paid the price, right, for it. And then trying to come out of that militant restriction was it was like pulling teeth. I mean, I know you remember the oh my goodness, I ate a sweet potato. And oh my goodness, my blood sugar shot up, like out of control because my body didn't know how to handle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to reteach my body how to handle good carbs. And how I even had to let go of the food tracking. I absolutely refuse to do any type of fasting restriction. Again, that's a restriction that might have served my purpose. I did some extreme fasting at one point in my journey for quite a while, and it was only making me worse. And I had to kind of recalibrate. I had to shift. I had to start looking at my body intuitively. My body was really telling me what it needed. I wasn't listening because I was so dogmatic in that one way and that one way only of eating. Um, and it's been a process. And I know
Mm-hmm.
bless you, you've been along this whole process from way years ago to now that, I mean, for my birthday, I had cake,
Mm-hmm.
and that would have never happened before. Um, so it intentionally including variety can help break that rigidness
Mm-hmm.
without the spiral, right? Because look, morbidly obese, that's what they called me at my top weight. I was considered morbidly obese. And everything was just bad. I was always shamed into, um, you're morbidly obese. You have these problems. Everything was. It's been such a long process, and I'm still, in the middle of my process of reframing that and creating the freedom of being able to mindfully eat. That's been huge. I ask myself things like, um, I love the taste, right? Like, oh my goodness, that's good. But I have also learned that if I have that second taste, it's not as good as the first. And we've talked about this, right?
Yeah.
There's, um, I'll let you jump in here in a minute and explain that side of it. But, am I tired? Am I stressed? Right? What is happening that's causing me to do that? But creating that routine, that fear of backsliding, of failing, of losing control, it is all very real.
Mhm.
So I'm going to let you take
Well,
all
and
that.
I
And,
think I think you nailed it. The
mhm,
reframing aspect, when you got to look at it as though you're not backtracking when
mhm,
you recalibrate, right? You're evolving. You're letting go of outdated tools. It's a sign of wisdom, not weakness. And that's where
right.
many of us, when we work on the mental health side of things, don't necessarily look at it that way. We look
Mhm,
at it, you're not quitting, you're not giving up, you're not, you're evolving, and you're constantly looking at this as far as a realignment aspect and making space, right? Sometimes we have to sit in that, and it's not always comfortable when we're
mhm,
reassessing. It gets a little emotional sometimes, but making space for that version of you that actually fits who and where you are now.
mhm.
And sometimes that's, it's not always about doing more, but it's not about doing nothing, right?
Right,
And so you got to figure out where is your alignment, and
right.
how can you shift from this, in your words, militant control to more of a
Mhm,
connection side of things, right? Many
mhm,
people
mhm.
start their journey with tracking macros, very rigid meal plans, just this whole side, forced workouts, right? I can't tell you how many times
Oh, yeah.
people have been so strict, not saying that
Mhm,
exercise isn't important, um
mhm.
not saying that at all, friends, so
Right, right.
don't jump all over us for that. But they're also not worried about sleep. They're treating their bodies like it's a
Right.
machine, and they're just going through the motions, right? Until they beat it into that submission, and they're so weak, and they're tired, and
Yep,
they're exhausted,
yep.
and the body doesn't feel safe. So guess what it's going to do? It's going to hold on to every damn morsel and love handle that it has
Mhm.
until you simply just are so frustrated. Because, and again, I can't tell you how many people, I just got off a session earlier today in regards of the same thing. She had done keto, she had done fasting, she had done macro tracking, she had done, all, in her words, all the things, right?
Mhm.
But she was still having high blood sugar. She was still having
Mm.
some issues, and she was doing, intermittent fasting. And I'm not going to end up and throw names out there, but she was doing a fasting program that the gal put together, that a lot of people end up and follow, and it backfired on her. It wasn't working, and she was feeling so defeated. But then, I'm telling her, shift this. You have to end up
Yep,
and shift this. You have
yep,
to shift that relationship. You have to know what your body
yep.
is needing. And she had low leptin, right? Her leptin was all out of whack. And there was just this sense of the body not feeling safe. And when I
Right.
told her, you have to end up and add other foods in. What does that look like? It's going to look like, a million times different depending who you're talking to, right? It's going to be different for everyone. It is so individualized. I had, multiple people in a group coaching Thursday night. I told them, multiple different ways, but what works for, Mary Jo over here is going to work for Nancy Beth down the street, right? A whole different way. And so you have to end up and figure that out. But the body has to feel safe. You have to be able to get sleep. You have to end up, and maybe that's adding carbs in. Maybe that's not fasting, right? And
Mhm.
she asked me, she said, "You tell me not to fast. You tell me to end up and eat breakfast, and you tell me to eat 3 meals a day, but you tell me also not to eat 3 to 4 hours before bed." There's a difference. There is a difference,
Mhm.
friends, in
Mhm.
the fact of circadian or intermittent fasting. If you're doing a hopefully 12, maybe 14-hour fast, that's going to be different than a 16, 18, 36, 72, 90
100.
hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to end up and be different on the
Yeah.
body. If you are simply stop eating at, we'll just say 6 o'clock, because typically I go to bed around 10. So if I stop eating at 6 o'clock at night and I don't eat until 6:30 in the morning, that's 12 and a half hours. My body is not going to end up and perceive stress in the same way if I was pushing it through extended fasting. And that's where sometimes you end up and you have to come back. And I get for some people that shift is hard
Right.
because they associate the fact of fasting with the weight loss. They associate the fact of not eating, right? But if your stress hormones, if your cortisol, if your leptin, if your insulin are all out of whack, it's going to end up and be backfiring, and you're going to be a hamster in your wheel chasing your ass. Sorry
Yep.
for the language. Kids, don't
You're
listen to
right.
this. But it's my
Disclaimer.
little soapbox. Yeah, disclaimer. Little late on disclaimer, but
Yeah.
you are, and
Mhm.
it's so hard for people to end up and understand that they have to get out of that hamster wheel.
Yep.
You have to be able to work with your body, work in alignment, and work with out of a spot that is
Mhm.
not fear-based control,
Right.
right?
Well,
There's so many large voices out there.
yeah, and if you're being told to push to white knuckle through something, let's stop for a moment and let's think about this logically, right?
Mhm.
So if I'm having trouble pushing a giant ball uphill and I'm struggling and it's starting to slide back, and somebody says to me, well, you need to white knuckle it and try a little harder, what that it doesn't compute, right?
Mhm.
So and I did that with fasting, right? I was under, I was under a doctor's care.
Yep.
And I could track it because I was wearing my CGM. Um, I was getting worse. My
Mhm.
blood sugars into a 36, 48, or 48, 36, 72 hour,
90.
100,
Yeah.
90 hour, 100 hour fast. My blood sugars were getting worse. And I would come out of those fasts gaining weight.
Mhm.
And I was told, well, you need to fast harder. You need to fast longer. You need to keep at it. And my body was saying, no, this was a stress. You can't do that because there's something wrong. And my body protected me, is what it did.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
did what it was designed to do. So that I literally stopped, and I still don't fast to this day. I don't for my body right now, I don't see that need, right? That doesn't mean that I get to that fork in the road and I may throw in some fasting around the moon cycles and things like that, which I have done. So but again, knowing that fork in the road and when, yep, I need to go this way, I need to stop doing X, or I need to add more carbs, or I need to change up my macros, or I need to change up my exercise. I remember early on, and I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm on the treadmill. You remember this, don't you, Becky?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, I'm hitting it and I'm going to get a couple miles in and blah, 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 and my blood sugar would get worse. And because I wasn't handling that morning cortisol spike,
Hmm.
right? My body was telling me, you can't do this at this time, right? We need to take care of this spike that's happening because your spike is so high that it took, oh gosh, what was it? Noon, 1 o'clock before it would finally come
I
down.
was to say sometimes 1, 2 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, and there I am adding a stress. I'm pounding it on that treadmill and I'm forcing it. And my body's going, you're really stressing me out.
Hmm.
Please stop. Right. So, um, and I know, again, we see that with our clients too.
Yep. Well, and that's where listening to this feedback, right? It's not, your
Hmm.
body isn't trying to work against you. It's just trying to communicate with you,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's burnout, whether that's hunger, mood swings, energy crashes, all of these are signs that your body is signaling to you, right? It's trying to provide you feedback. And that feedback isn't failure, it's just meaning that you need to end up and redo. You need to recalibrate, right? You need to view these symptoms as signals, not moral judgments,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's where many times people get so stuck in moral groups or dogma type groups that they get stuck in this and not listening to, right? The body is very intelligent. If we use the biofeedback, right? How is your sleep? How is your digestion? How is your mood? How is your
Hmm.
skin? How are your cycles? Are you, postmenopausal? Hey, I relate to, menopausal women because that's where my hormones are, as far as having my hysterectomy and having, I was put into the medical menopause. So when I talk to menopausal women, they're like, but you're in your 40s. Getcha. I had a hysterectomy 15 years ago. So
Right.
I'm well beyond that stage. But it's also the fact that the adrenals and the thyroid and all of
Hmm.
this can pick up and make this secondary hormones if we just listen to its signals,
Hmm.
right? Drop the perfection, embrace the journey, right?
Hmm.
um and realizing that a stall is just a signal, it's
Hmm.
a sign, right?
Hmm.
What have you done? Have you got into that gray area? Or have you got into the exercise? Have you, been on the treadmill maybe a little too much? Has your leisurely walks in nature gone to, an hour on the treadmill? Have you shifted that to, an earlier part of the day when you know that stress is already prominent? There's things like that. And so there's questions that you need to end up and ask yourself, not, what's wrong with me? This is, trust me, these are questions that I've heard from one person particular early on in their journey. What's wrong with me? Will this ever end up in work? And why can't I just do this?
Who? Who?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in
In tears.
reality,
In
yeah.
tears. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Oh, yeah.
There's been several phone calls. And that's where, again, it's a process. I've had the same questions, but if we end up and we refocus, that's why a lot of times, if anyone has followed me on my Instagram, it's a reset, refocus, side of it. Reboot, reset, refocus, right? It's not, I'm not quitting and I'm not changing many of my foundations, but it's a case of what is still working for me? What have I outgrown? What in my routine needs to change? Maybe it's change of the season. Maybe it's a change of, my kids home for the summer versus my kids in school. My day is, starting at 6 o'clock in or 5:30 instead of, 6:30. What
Hmm.
is it about my day and how do I need to adjust accordingly?
Yeah.
And how do I need to truly align with that? Not being afraid of that pivot, but choosing it with a purpose, right?
Right.
Don't repeat the old habit, recalibrate, reset, refocus, and you'll notice that the energy starts to shift.
Yeah.
Your energy, right, starts to shift.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so once
Well,
we
and I was going to say, you can take that and you can sit back for a moment and think, what parts of that is forced? what part of it is ineffective, and what part of it is now outdated, right? Because my body was screaming, my body was telling me something, I wasn't listening, right? Because I had to do it that militant way. And since I've relaxed it all, I'm literally shrinking, like size wise. The scale isn't dropping huge amounts, but I'm definitely seeing a difference. And it's been interesting, um, that time to shift, because what happened was I tanked my thyroid and my hormones because I was so rigid, and I was
Mhm.
my body literally, it was telling me to stop, and I wasn't listening. I was doing it harder and faster and harder
Mhm.
and harder and meticulous, and oh my goodness, and what is my blood sugar, and you know I even quit wearing my CGM. I haven't had that on for what, a couple months now.
Yeah.
Um, right? Because numbers spin me out. Like, oh my gosh, I was weighing once a week. I stopped doing that. I'm weighing once a month just to see how's it going now. I don't feel that need to force the numbers. You have given up tracking your food,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
You gave up weighing yourself,
yeah.
what, daily?
Yeah,
Weren't you doing that? Yeah, yeah,
I was doing it daily, and I
yeah.
still end up in waste. So for anyone that is over there on Instagram watching and they're like, but she just posted yesterday, right? Yes, I
Yeah,
did. I still end up in habit, but I have stepped off of the scale every day, and it's really looking at, and I had someone else ask me earlier, sure, macros and tracking and all of that is a tool that can be used, but I also don't think that people need to live by those tools. That you should be able to, and I still am mindful of my food, right? I still look at the lower glycemic foods and the higher, glycemic foods as far as energy sources. So we've talked about it before, energy sources. When we use carbs for energy source versus fats, right? I'm not going to end up and put high fat, high carb. I know that the body has to have a fuel source, but it doesn't need them both at once. That's where we start to store. And so, yes, carbs can be beneficial when it comes to thyroid and, the safety of the body, leptin signaling, all of that. Carbs can end up and be beneficial, but so can fats when it comes towards mental health and, other hormones and that side of things, right? So having both of them can be beneficial. But like I was telling someone today, I look at the foods that are in season and how does it fit under those categories as energy sources. And for instance, today, right, I had a salad with protein on it, and I had olive oil as a dressing. I had avocado this morning with some sausages, and it's just looking at how I'm going to, set that day. Um, if I was to have higher carb, then those meals are going to obviously look a little bit different. But that's kind of how, I moved away and realigned food wise into more of this clarity as far as what I am having. And there's just this difference when it comes to the clarity that gets out of your head as far as food noise, right?
right.
A lot of times, a lot of people will talk about food noise. A lot of people will talk about it in various ways, and that's why they kind of keep going, or they're constantly thinking about food
Yeah,
or whatever. When
yep.
you look at food as nourishment and what it truly is, again, it's you have three macros, right? You have protein, fats, and carbs. And when you look at it as how is this going to serve me,
Mhm.
it gets away from that guilt, it gets away from the fear, it gets away from the dietary egos, and it really just helps with getting that emotional tie to food. A lot of times that's why people end up, we talked with Sly, in our roundtable discussion about the halt, right? The
Mm-hmm.
hungry, angry, lonely, tired aspect. And it cuts that emotional side so that you're able to end up and know the difference between, right? Um, between the two. And
Right.
so when we choose this path of clarity and we choose the difference between quitting and pivoting, right? I don't just throw my hands up and say that the heck with this. I'll try to keep this PG for any kids that are in the background. Um, throw our hands up and say, the heck with this and give all in, right? And go nose deep in junk. But it's more okay, what do I end up and I need?
Yeah.
It's quitting that feeling of escaping your routine, because that comes from burnout, it comes from shame, it comes from frustration,
Yep.
but it's creating a plan, and you
Mm-hmm.
pivot to where you are able to introduce other foods. You are able to, carry on. Maybe that, I know Sly talked about her, her ribeye that she ends up and she has, but when you are no longer forcing your body to follow someone else's plan or someone else's strategy or routine or structure, it starts to serve you in a better purpose.
Yeah. Well, and food plans are maps, but the journey needs recalculating, right? And it's okay. Sustainability beats that rigid every single time. Um, before you eat, pause and ask, am I choosing from power to or pattern, right? Because I can, with the best of intentions, fall into the pattern of eating the same things over and over and over. Why? It's easy, right? I know that if I eat X, I'm getting X amount of macros, right? I'm getting my fats, I'm getting my protein, I know, right? And it becomes so easy to do. And so I have made it um, that I've expanded that a lot more, and even in my cooking. And when we do go out to eat, I've kind of shifted some things up. I've had a couple weeks ago, we went out to a steak place, and I had steak, and I had asparagus and broccoli, and I ate them. Right? Well, I don't have a lot of asparagus, and so that was a switch up for me. That was
Mhm.
something new. Um, but again, anchoring the meals, right, to are you grabbing it because it's lunchtime and I'm starving and oh my goodness, I'm going to run through the fast food place to get something? Or are you uh, being more intentional with your food, right? Are you slowing down? Are you enjoying the chewing and the taste of it? Um, breathing, right? Making sure that you're just not sucking the food down and running. Yes, we all go through those times, right? I'm the best of them. I can go through fast food and I can grab my burger patties and, be on my way. But I chose the burger patties over I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm going to have, the full on fries and, bread and everything that goes with it. I don't throw that out the door. And you and I've talked about how we can pretty much eat anywhere at this point, because I can ask the kitchen how to fix things,
Mhm.
right? So I just think that if you are really in that fork in the road and you're frustrated and you're ready to give up, maybe think about getting some accountability.
Yeah. Coaching, definitely. We have the community as well. We just opened up
Mhm.
the free part of the community as well. So jumping into
Yep.
those meetings, there are different steps that you can end up and take. I would say that 5 different steps, right? We'll put it into that 5 different steps. One, pausing and assessing, right? Stop being on that autopilot. Stop being on that creature of habit. And I'm notorious for that as well. I literally just said this afternoon, I'm like, I'm a creature of habit. I tend to eat the same foods. I vary it. I have a lot more variation now than what I have, journaling, you know, use your journal, right?
Yeah.
Ask what is actually working,
Yeah.
what has become a habit, and what is draining me. 3 questions right there to end up and start a good, journal aspect. Um, Check your alignment. Step 1, pause and assess. Do your journaling. End up and ask yourself those 3 questions. Step 2, check your alignment. What do your current routines look like? I know your routine has just changed. My routine's about to change because we're less than a month out of school. And
Mhm.
so that means, my daughter will be going back to school. The mornings are going to change. She's started a job, so her evenings are going to change. It means our home, right, has ended up and
Mhm.
changed
Mhm.
because, it's just going to end up and be my husband and I now for meals. Um, in the evening unless she has a day off work. So, what does your routine look like? What are your goals? Set short term goals and long term goals. What are your choices that support the energy of that season?
Yeah.
Right. For me, summer looks a lot different than winter time as far as sleep routine goes, as far as evening routine goes. Are you choosing to stay in this pattern because of truth or because of fear of change?
Right.
That is a big thing when you check your alignment. Why is it that you're doing this?
Well, and you need to disrupt that isolation thinking, right? Because plateaus often trigger the lie that I must be doing something wrong alone, right?
Yeah.
And that's where community shines a light on the shared experiences, and it reminds you that you're human and you're not a failure. Being in community helps people come alongside of you. They have those um, excitements. They're excited for you. That energy is contagious. The strategies, somebody else may have a great idea to come up with that you hadn't thought of. Um, but that fork in that road, a lot of times that vision is so tunnel. and
Mhm.
and what do? How do you get out of that tunnel vision? And you need to reframe, right? And again, that's where community and coaching comes in. Building the micro accountabilities, whether it's a nudge, a check-in, a celebration, a a moment of just holding you and supporting you. Because the journey, it's going to get messy. That's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? And we're all emotional beings. We all don't have it together, and it's still worthy of you continuing. So, the safety is that real change is scary, but the coaching and the community is where um, it kind of helps you go to, take that left hand turn in that fork of the road, and finding out that you can rewire the old scripts, and choose different alignments, right? Get into more of the circadian rhythm of, and both Becky and I've been in that road, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, deciding what the mindset, right? What is your expectation? What is your strategy? What are your boundaries? Setting those good boundaries. Um, Sometimes it's not you have to work harder or you need to work more, but maybe it's, I need to move more consistently. I need to do it in a joyful, peaceful, go out and walk without headphones, walk without, really just be present
Yep.
and be in the moment, right? No devices, no headphones, just
Right.
listen to the birds, listen to the surrounding, right? Walk with a higher power, I'll put it that way. But really just kind of focus on that and reset that. Um, it's not necessarily that you need to eliminate more foods, maybe, but you need to end up and nourish and slow down, right? Um, so
Maybe you're
yeah,
not eating enough.
yeah, which has become a problem, more so of a problem than what it
Yep.
sounds like. There's a lot of people that are under eating
Yep.
because they end up and they're eating, but they eat such small meals that are smaller than what I would serve a 3-year-old.
Right.
So really look at what you are consuming, and that's kind of where setting small shifts, right? Don't look at the big picture, right? I see the comment here in regards of looking at the years, looking at the
Mhm.
amounts. Don't
Mhm.
look at the big picture, look at the small picture,
Mhm.
right? I had a gal come to me and and tell me that she was only able to do 5 minutes of morning light. 5 minutes is great. It's better than
Right.
nothing, right?
Right.
So pick your intentional change. Maybe that's one or two things that are going to help support your recalibration. You don't need to do a full overhaul and do both feet in and throw your old habits to the you know trash. What are 1 to 2 different changes that you can end up and make over the next 4 to 6 weeks? Make those changes. Maybe that's adding 15 minutes of morning light. Maybe that's 15 minutes of breath work. Maybe you're moving your biggest meal to earlier in the day. It doesn't have to be the perfect plan. Maybe it's just a check-in and adjustment. Maybe
Mhm.
you're checking in, like you said, the meetings, or check in with a coach, or whatever the case may be, to see what your weekly flow is. All of those are perfect.
Yep.
They don't, it doesn't have to be this whole elaborate 20-step plan. Which kind of leads me to the final step of the review reflect. Clarity compounds. So as you continue to gain this clarity, as you continue to gain this momentum, set weekly or set monthly, right? Check-ins. We do check-ins in the community, check in with
Mhm.
a coach, whatever works for you.
Mhm.
And maybe that's checking into your journal, right? I gave you the 3 questions at the beginning. Ask yourself at the end, is this still working? What's draining me versus what's nourishing me this week? Have I drifted back into a repeat mode, or am I still being responsive? There's a difference in being responsive and just, like I said, going through the motions. So,
Absolutely. I think that ended on a good note.
so like I said, clarity isn't in the perfect plan, and it's
No.
not about my
No.
plan versus your plan versus everyone
No.
else's plan that is in this. It's just being brave enough to question what is no longer fitting you, what is no longer wise enough to, or what is no longer fits you, and it is being of service, right? And being wise enough to shift that with a purpose.
Absolutely. And again, if you need help, we have opened up the community for free. Do you want to stick that banner
Yep.
on the screen down, 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 down there, that.
Yes.
And there's a reason that Becky opened it up for free. And I'm going to let you, from the heart, tell everyone why, because I think this is a good point in our conversation. I know it makes us cry every time she says it, but
So we had a member, had a dear friend, had a client. She was all of the above. She was sweetheart of the community. Um, when I first started coaching her 5 years ago, she always ended up and told me that we had the space, we had the knowledge, and we needed to be able to help the people. And right now, the way that things are, and I'm not going to end up and get into religion or politics or anything with this, but the way that things are right now, a lot of people end up and need help. And if that meant opening things up for free, then that's what I needed to do. And there needs to be a space where people can come together, feel that connection, feel that love, feel that kindness, and feel that support that she instilled in us, whether it was from the times that we spent online or the times that we actually spent, together, connected at a gathering. The love and the warmth from her, we are rippling that effect and helping and sharing others. And so there is the aspect of the free community, but the community is so much more than that. And we are honored to be able to, in her words, help the people.
That's right. That's right. And she ended up passing.
She did.
And so it left a hole in our hearts. But again, like Becky said, this is our way of honoring her. And if you have to choose between putting food on the table or being in a paid community, we don't want you to have to make that choice. We want you in the community. We want you to get the help that you need. And there's plenty of people out there in that situation. And it is my passion. It is Becky's passion, and it is Coach Sly's passion to help.
Absolutely. So we would love to end up and have you there. Join. You can go to bncommunity.com, use the coupon code FREE, and that will give you the community for free.
Absolutely. So don't forget to subscribe. We go live every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. You get us like you get us. We don't pretend to be anything we're not. We don't have big old, lights over here. We don't have the microphones in our faces. We aren't sponsored by anyone. We believe truly in healing the whole body. Let's see, we've been at this over 2 years now, right, Becky?
Mm-hmm.
I have. So we definitely, if you put in the comments that you want to have us talk to a particular person, we'd love to do interviews with people. We are bringing Coach Sly on. Is it every month we decided?
Yeah,
Yeah,
routinely.
yeah,
We just got to figure out which Monday works best for her.
yeah.
First,
So
second, third, whatever.
yeah, so you'll get 3 of us, right, instead of just the 2 of us, and so, but feel free to comment, share if you go back some of our past, podcasts with some of our, people that we've talked to, share those, but we love the feedback, and we're so glad that you're here and you attended, tonight.
Absolutely. And just know that we support you. We're looking to empower you. You don't owe loyalty to an old version of you that you have outgrown. Real change isn't just about pushing harder. It's really about listening deeper and listening to that voice that comes, even if it is in a dream. So you're not behind, you're just recalibrating, and we support you in any way, shape, or form that comes. And have